When people imagine the decline of the Roman Empire, they immediately picture barbarians storming the gates, legions collapsing, or emperors being poisoned in marble palaces. But empires rarely fall only because of an external blow. The real destruction almost always begins from within, and the most silent, most dangerous cause of collapse is often money. Rome didn't fall solely because of wars or corruption. Its greatest internal wound was the decay of its own currency. And in truth, this example applies to every modern state that believes money solves everything. For centuries, Rome trusted a single coin, the silver denarius. Minted in 211 BC, it was nearly pure silver, and people across the empire believed in it. Soldiers' wages, merchants' trade, farmers' earnings, everything depended on this coin. The denarius wasn't just a piece of metal, it was the very embodiment of trust in the Roman Empire. As long as the people trusted Rome, they trusted its money without question. But running a massive empire wasn't cheap. Legions, roads, aqueducts, wars, everything required enormous wealth. By the 2nd century, Rome was fighting Germanic tribes, Parthians, and internal rebellions all at once. Taxes couldn't cover the expenses, and so the emperors resorted to the oldest trick in political history. They changed the coin's composition. Instead of raising taxes and angering the public, they quietly reduced the silver content. On paper, nothing changed, but inside the money was hollowing out. The silver purity of the denarius, which had been 95% under Augustus, dropped to 50% under Caracalla, and by Gallienus's time, it was below 5%. What once had been nearly pure silver became a bronze disc with only a thin coating of silver. And people began to notice. Inflation followed, prices soared. The grain you once bought with a single denarius now required dozens. Soldiers demanded higher pay, merchants refused debased coins, and bartering began to reappear. People no longer trusted money but goods, gold, land, anything with real value. This situation pushed Rome into the crisis of the 3rd century. For nearly 50 years, Rome was overwhelmed by invasions, plague, civil wars, and economic collapse. Emperors rose and fell in rapid succession, some lasting only weeks. And at the heart of all this chaos was the collapse of the denarius, a currency once viewed as the very symbol of Roman power. The government tried to save the system through compulsory regulations and decrees, but none of it worked. Even Diocletian's famous edict on maximum prices failed to rescue the situation. Attempting to fix prices by force only worsened the crisis. Black markets flourished, official trade nearly stopped, and people realized that no law could refill a hollowed-out coin. Eventually, Rome abandoned the denarius entirely. Constantine introduced the gold solidus. This brought some stability to the Eastern Empire, but for the West, it was already too late. The core of the empire, trust, had long since been shattered. Rome didn't collapse in a single moment. It emptied from within, slowly, and then all at once. And the root cause of this collapse was the deterioration of its currency. What does this whisper to us today? Something very simple. Any state that destroys its money will eventually destroy itself. Modern governments repeat the same mistakes, printing money, manipulating interest rates, erasing their debts through inflation. But the ending is always the same. Wealth evaporates, and the burden falls on ordinary people. History shows the same pattern repeatedly. After World War I, hyperinflation in Germany wiped out people's life savings before their eyes. In Zimbabwe between 2008 and 2009, inflation was so extreme that the government stopped publishing the numbers. Prices doubled within a single day. The currency became so worthless that people abandoned it entirely. In all these cases, the pattern repeats. Governments try to hide problems with the printing press, and in the end, the people lose everything. Even developed nations are not immune. In 1971, the US dollar, like Rome's denarius, was detached from gold and began to rely solely on trust. Debts ballooned, the money supply exploded, and inflation became a constant threat. We may not carry sacks of money, but we feel the loss of purchasing power every second. The money looks the same, but its essence has been drained, and governments try to convince us that this hollowing out process is economic growth. What makes today's situation terrifying is this. When Rome collapsed, the world was not Rome. When Weimar collapsed, the world was not Germany. When Zimbabwe collapsed, the world was not Zimbabwe. But today, the entire world operates under the same system. Fiat money, massive debt, and central banks ready to create trillions at will. This means that the next global crisis is closer than ever. And history shows that in such times, it is always the ordinary people who suffer the most. So, what lesson should an individual take from Rome? First, inflation is never an accident. It has been the quietest and most deceptive tax of governments for thousands of years. Second, real wealth is not the shiny numbers glowing on a screen. Real wealth is what preserves value: land, skills, production, and real assets. Third, never blindly assume that stability is permanent. Romans never imagined their trusted coin would become worthless. Germans in 1923 never imagined a loaf of bread would cost 200 billion marks. Zimbabweans never imagined their currency would vanish. The fall of the Roman Empire teaches this. Financial systems collapse slowly, then suddenly. When money loses value, the pillars of society crack. Trade stops, armies fall apart, the state weakens. The barbarian at the gates may deliver the final blow, but it is always the money, the system people depended on, that kills the empire. And the final lesson is simple. History may not repeat itself, but if you don't understand the mechanism, you will be the one crushed by it. Rome's currency crisis is not just an ancient story. It is one of the most important lessons still unfolding today. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe, because history has already given the answers, and I'm here to show them to you.